What's going on, everybody? My name is Aiden and welcome back to another video. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I am back in action and it's been a long, tedious week, if I do say so myself. But we're going to take a step away from the draft videos. It's been a week and I want to kind of recalibrate in many ways, talk about something simple for a little bit before we move into the more advanced things, which would be obviously the draft prospects and everything in between. We still got about maybe 2 weeks since until the draft comes around, so we've got time, and we've really done a lot of scouting research, in my opinion, to kind of give us a good sense of who we're going to pick and the type of players we're going to pick. I'm very confident the players that we will pick will be at least someone that we've talked about, and if it isn't, then we're going to continue the streak, because it seems like everybody we've talked about, almost none of them actually get picked by the Chicago Bulls. But I want to redirect it to something that happened earlier this week while I was sick and stuff of that nature. I want to talk about something that's happened around Zach LaVine. Apparently there's some news stories around Zach LaVine that I find extremely interesting, and I want to talk about it in this video. But before we get any further, if you like the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new, and let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls and Zach LaVine, and will this situation come to an end? Does Zach LaVine leave the Chicago Bulls in this offseason before the season's beginnings, or will the saga continue into the season and we'll have to deal with more and more trade talks going forward? Now, what's going on with Zach LaVine? Well, the news story here is essentially Zach LaVine is in a situation where his trade value is so low. Apparently, the Bulls are just considering a salary dump type of trade for Zach LaVine. Now, that is a big piece of news, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the reason why. There have been many Zach LaVine trade videos from the Chicago Bulls, and even this Bulls channel, not the Chicago Bulls, but this channel specifically, amongst other Bulls content creators across the world. There's been many videos about Zach LaVine getting traded to certain teams. And at the end of the day, that is something that we're always going to talk about until Zach LaVine does get traded. But now we're hearing stories and news, and I think Casey Johnson was even someone that was talking about this, suggesting that his trade value is that low that it might not be the type of trade that we're looking for. It could just be the salary dump type of trade. We have to talk about it because I think a select few people probably thought, okay, this is a salary dump. We're not going to get anything for Zach LaVine. I think there's a select few people. I'm not one of them. I was one of those people that firmly believed we would get value out of Zach LaVine. I know he's on a max contract and he's had injury-riddled seasons for the past couple of seasons, and I understand that. I really do. But the fact of the matter is, he is still a very good shooting guard in this league that can give you 20, 25 points per game and can change a game for you at his best. That's what you're getting with Zach LaVine if you get the best Zach LaVine available. A Zach LaVine that's committed to the team and a Zach LaVine that is performing at his best. You get that type of player, and most teams would be happy with that type of player. But the harsh reality is, it looks like no one's willing to give him that chance to kind of show what he's all about, or at least for value in return. So let's give you an example. We've talked a lot about Zach LaVine going to the Sixers, Zach LaVine going to the Lakers, Zach LaVine going to Cleveland, Zach LaVine going to the Spurs. Every team you could think of, Zach LaVine has been probably rumored in that conversation. Charlotte. There's a lot of teams, right? And, you know, we've talked about Zach LaVine for Donovan Mitchell, for example. We talked about Zach LaVine for D'Angelo Russell and a couple of other guys. I don't want to list them again. I'm drawing a blank in that retrospect. Zach LaVine to the Charlotte Hornets for a couple of role players. Zach LaVine to Philly for as a Tobias Harris sign and trade, or whatever the case may be. Just talent. Someone that you can truly understand the value of and you can get something in return for. And that all makes complete sense to me, but it looks like even those trades might be too far gone, and we will be dealing with salary dumps. So, you're looking at bad contracts that the Bulls are going to be willing to take on, expiring deals that the Bulls are going to be willing to take on, and maybe not use the money in free agency and probably have a little bit more, actually I would say a lot more money to use in free agency in a couple seasons' time. So what's the good and the bad to this situation? Because there is some good. It's not all good. At the end of the day, I'd much rather have talent to move forward with than getting a salary dump type of situation, in all honesty. But the good thing is, you will get your money back within 2 seasons' time. You will get a lot of money that you can spend on free agency. So this season might be the write-off. For example, you're going to trade Zach LaVine for a 1-year deal worth $30 million. You're not going to be able to use the money in free agency, or at least a very select little margin of it you could use in free agency. But the season after that, you get a couple of expiring deals in there, and you're going to be able to do a lot more in free agency in 2 seasons' time. So you've got to think long-term. That could be a very valuable asset to the Chicago Bulls. You also get a situation where more teams become interested. Again, maybe teams are not willing to offer talent in return, but for a salary dump type of situation, you will get more teams interested. You will get the top teams interested. You will get the middle of the pack teams interested. Heck, you might even get teams like Detroit interested because they've got money to spend. There are a few teams out there in this league that've got money to spend and also salaries to dump. So you will get more teams interested. In their minds, at least, it's going to be a low risk, high reward type of situation. You're salary dumping someone to bring Zach LaVine in return. Zach LaVine will most likely be 10 times better than the player that we get in return. With that being said, he can perform, make the team better. They get rid of a player that they don't want, salary dump that player, and that player is our responsibility. And we either play him for a season, we waive him, I don't know what we're going to do, but we get to make the decision, I guess, on our own accord in that regard. The negatives. You get very little assets in return that you could want. Now, I'm hoping in a salary dump we could get some picks. I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask for. At the end of the day, Zach LaVine is not a salary dump player. I don't care what anybody tells me. You can get some assets in return for Zach LaVine. And if those assets are first and second round picks, then maybe that's a situation that we go with. But that's ultimately what I'm hoping for in this situation. But the assets you get in return will not be anywhere near the conversations we've been talking about when it comes to Zach LaVine. It just won't. And that may include first round picks. Also, another negative in regards to this, you don't necessarily get the future that you're hoping for. You don't have the direction that you'll be hoping for. You trade Zach LaVine for salary dump, that doesn't change whether you go with continuity. It doesn't change the retool because you're going to get no core piece in return. It's not going to change, I guess, the rebuilds, whatever. It doesn't really determine anything. With a Zach LaVine trade, one thing I am looking for is a direction. I want to go somewhere with this trade. I want to go somewhere to know what our future is going to look like. If it is the retool when we bring that core piece to replace Zach LaVine, that's fantastic. Whether we go younger, get a couple of picks, and move on from Zach LaVine in that regard, great. At least we have our future there. We know what we're going to do. When you get Zach LaVine for a salary dump, I don't think there's any direction in that. And the Bulls don't need that type of trade. But if that's the only trade available, well, there's a big question that needs to be asked. Do you keep Zach LaVine now if all you get for him is salary dump? Do you force Zach LaVine to play in this Bulls team, work his ass off to get that trade value back up before getting rid of him? And it's a difficult question because you know my motto. My motto has been the same with Zach LaVine and for any player really that steps foot into this Chicago Bulls team. And that motto is, I don't want players that do not want to be here. And it looks like even rumors are suggesting Zach LaVine and the Bulls are pushing for this deal to happen more and more by the day. This deal, this trade, is looking more likely now than it did last season. And that's because both parties are pushing for this deal to happen, pushing for a trade to happen. So that's the harsh reality. I don't want a player that doesn't want to be here. Does that mean I want to sacrifice my future for that, though? Does that mean I want to sacrifice assets in return? Maybe Zach LaVine could do us the common courtesy and actually play for this Bulls team until he gets his value up. Maybe that's a conversation internally the Bulls can have. I think Zach LaVine's done a lot for this Bulls team, but I also think equally the Bulls have done a lot for LaVine. If it wasn't for the Bulls, Zach LaVine wouldn't be making the money that he's making now. If it wasn't for the Bulls, Zach LaVine wouldn't be getting this 15% trade kicker that he's going to be getting after a trade. So at least he can do is play for the Bulls for a specific period of time, maybe up until the trade deadline, work his ass off, perform really, really well, at least individually, and get that trade value up so we could get something in return. I don't necessarily think that's too much to ask for. But regardless of that fact, my stance remains the same. I don't want a player that doesn't want to be here. I like Zach LaVine, think it's a good talent, and I like him as a human being. I really, really do. But the harsh reality is, he said he wants to leave, so whatever we get in return, I think it's best to get this over and done with before the season begins. What do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Drop a like and a follow, and or subscribe if you are new. It feels good to be back, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care, and peace.